We have here a 2013 Volkswagen GTI. It has a 2.0 liter CCT engine, and the customer's concern is that it stopped running and it wouldn't run, it keeps dying, and if he unplugs the mass airflow sensor, it'll then run. He bought a mass airflow sensor and put a new one on it, and that did not fix the problem. So obviously we'll need to plug in the mass airflow sensor and scan for trouble codes. Let's get started. So the mass airflow sensor is unplugged, so obviously we're going to have a trouble code there. Okay, down there I've got our VADCOM dongle plugged in. Let's get our fault codes. Sensor for ambient air temperature sensor. Is that like an intake air temperature sensor? And mass airflow sensor voltage supply. Obviously we're going to need to plug in the mass airflow sensor, so we'll do that and clear codes and see what reoccurs. Now, some vehicles have the intake air temperature sensor built into the mass airflow sensors, but this one only has 3 prongs in the connector. So that probably means the intake air temperature sensor is not built into this mass airflow sensor. Some of them are built into the MAP sensor, and that may be the case on this one, but actually that says ambient air temperature sensor. On older cars, that's only used for air conditioning. I'm not sure that that is relevant to our problem, but since it is coming out of the engine computer, and obviously the engine computer needs to know the mass of the air, so the temperature is very relevant to the fuel injection, we'll clear the codes and see what reoccurs. FYI, the customer's concern is that the car won't stay running when the mass airflow sensor is plugged in, so obviously we drove it in with it unplugged and it ran just fine. We did not take it for a road test, we just brought it in to scan and take a quick look. So we'll clear those codes. See what reoccurs. And the sensor for ambient air temperature reoccurred immediately. So I'm going to take a look over the car, and I'm also going to look up where that sensor is, and we'll go from there. Oh, I guess while I have the mass airflow sensor plugged in, I'll show you what the car is doing wrong. The idle surges and then it dies. Let's try that again. Notice the fans just came on for some reason, probably related to that ambient air temperature trouble code. It's staying running right now, but the idle's surging like crazy. We will look for that ambient air temperature sensor and see if it's plugged in. Normally part of the diagnostic process would be to scan for trouble codes and then look at the measuring blocks or the data relating to those trouble codes. So I'll look in VADCOM to see if there's a measuring block relating to the ambient air temperature sensor, and we'll look up where that temperature sensor is and go from there. Okay, I've spent some time, and I can tell you right now I'm struggling a little bit. Work on Volkswagens, they said. It'll be easy. Well, not so much. I have found the intake air temperature sensor in the measuring blocks. That is the intake air temperature sensor, I believe, though. It's not the ambient air temperature sensor, and the way you would tell is because it says G42. That's in field 102, but I'm not sure that's the ambient air temperature sensor. Now, I'm looking through the engine computer, of course. As I said, usually the ambient air temperature sensor is relating to the AC, so maybe I'll look in the AC system next. But I'm not sure that's the same thing. That says G42, and our code, let's go back and look what our code was. Fault codes. Yeah, the intake air temperature sensor is a G17, and that's not what we're after. So I'm not having any luck finding a measuring block for the ambient air temperature sensor in the engine computer. I also spent some time looking up in my technical service subscriptions to see if they would identify the measuring block for it, and I can't find it anywhere. So that's a little frustrating. A little bit of time wasted, but so I'm going to change gears a little bit, and I've already done this. I looked for the ambient air temperature sensor, and I can't find it either. My tech service shows component locations, and the car just doesn't seem to have it where it's supposed to be. Now I walked out to another GTI that I have here. It's a 2011 though, and I can see the ambient air temperature very clearly, and I think that's where it belongs. So I'm going to go looking for the ambient air temperature sensor and go from there. This isn't a GTI. This is a Gti Dies. Not exactly the same, but it does show you where the ambient air temperature sensor goes and kind of where the harness is routed. Okay, we're here looking at the front of this car, and this is where the sensor should be, right in there where that hole is, right in that bracket right there. And on the other GTI, that's where it sits. And I can see it there. I can see the wires running to it on the other GTI. But the other GTI is a 2011, so I'm not sure it'd be exactly the same. My tech service says that that's where it should be, but I don't see any wires in here. I don't see anything, any sensor. So I will pull the bottom cover and see if I can find anything. Okay, I looked down through the top area and looked for a sensor just hanging there, and looked for a harness, didn't find nothing. And so we pulled the bottom cover off, and I went up in here looking, and I was looking up in this area for a harness and stuff, and I couldn't find anything. I looked and looked and looked, but then Bob found this. I know it looks very obvious now, but it was tucked up in there where we couldn't see it. And eventually we fished these wires out of it, and that's probably our intake air temperature sensor wires. I don't know how it ended up in this situation. I do have to note there's a new sticker there, and there's a new sticker on the cover. So probably this car's had some damage at some point, and the sensor's been, then the car's been put back together. Maybe the sensor got damaged, and they forgot to put the sensor back in when the body shop resurrected the front of the car. You may not be able to see it in the video, but there's one that's brown with a blue stripe, and the other one is brown with a yellow stripe. Let's go look in our schematic and see if our ambient air temperature sensor has those wire colors. So here I am getting pretty frustrated again. I looked through the engine computer schematics, and there's 6 pages of them, by the way, and I couldn't find an ambient air temperature sensor that inputted to the engine computer. So what I ended up doing is searching, and so I searched for ambient and couldn't find anything, and getting a little frustrated. And then I searched for air temperature, and here's what I came up with eventually. It says outside air temperature, and it kind of sucks that they don't use the same terminology in the scan tool as in the wiring schematic here, and that's very frustrating, but that's just something we have to live with. Work on Volkswagens, they said. It'll be easy. So I did find an outside air temperature sensor, and it does have brown and yellow wires and brown and blue wires, just like what we have on the car. Normally when I'd have a missing sensor like this, I would hook in a potentiometer. That's an adjustable resistor that I could dial in and hopefully match the resistance of the original sensor, and that way I could tell for sure that would fix the problem. But unfortunately, I cannot find my adjustable resistor, and I'm not about to drive all the way to downtown Kansas City to buy another one. Here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm not convinced this is going to fix the problem. As I said, in older cars, that sensor would only be used in air conditioning. But here's the point. The customer needs that sensor on the car and working, so we need to get an intake air temperature sensor here anyway. We need to get a harness connector, solder it in, and fix that, because more than likely the customer's not going to have working AC without that, or at least he'll have some type of symptom relating to that, and they'll obviously have a trouble code in the engine computer. So I think I'm going to call the customer and suggest that we install an ambient air temperature sensor, and at least we'll get that out of the way, and then we'll continue to address this problem if it doesn't fix it. I kind of feel like it will fix it, because the temperature of the air coming into the engine is very relevant to the mass of the air. So mass airflow sensor is a very important player, so the computer needs to know the temperature of the air in order to determine how much fuel to inject based on the mass airflow sensor. So, but the problem with it is there's also an intake air temperature sensor on this car. I know this because when I found the measuring block, it had a temperature reading of 18 degrees in there, if I recall, and that seems to be working, so not sure this is going to fix it. Anyway, let's get a sensor on the car and see what happens. Okay, on our GTI, we have received our harness, our ambient air temperature sensor, and the wires that go to it, and we have twisted them to strip the wires and twist it to it, just a short-term connection, because it's going to be a little bit difficult to get it in there where it belongs. So we'll start the car with that hooked up, see if our code reoccurs, and see if it solves our issue. Okay, we'll plug this in, and we'll turn the key on. I think we'll turn the key on and then clear the codes and then start the car. Our VAGCOM is wireless, so we have the computer over here. And we have our ambient air temperature sensor trouble code, and I assume mass airflow sensor trouble code. We only had that unplugged because it's easier to drive the car in and out of the bay. So we'll clear that. See if anything reoccurs. And we'll start the car and see if it's fixed. Surging an awful lot. Still dying. Still surging and dying. Let's see if the code reoccurred. That kind of gave me a little trouble here. And the ambient air temperature sensor code is gone, so that fixed that part of it, but it didn't fix the running problem. We'll have to take a look and see what we're going to do next. This does remind me of a couple times where we've had, I think there was a gasket leak back here, and that made a huge vacuum leak, because if the crankcase is leaking, the crankcase vent area will draw too much air through it, and that'll make like a vacuum leak. But mostly it reminds me of one where we had this tube out for diagnosis, or maybe we were I don't remember what we were doing, but we had the tube out, and we were trying to drive the car in and out of the bay. We needed the bay for some reason, and the car wouldn't run with this tube out. So we unplugged the mass airflow sensor because the computer's looking at that thinking it's a real signal, but yet there's no air flowing through it because this was disconnected. And since it behaves like that, it'll run with the mass airflow sensor unplugged. Maybe we have an air leak, an unmetered air problem, and it's making it do that. That would cause the mass airflow signal to be completely off, and we wouldn't get the correct fuel trims. I guess the best way to proceed would be to go ahead and pull this off, and maybe we could identify a unmetered air leak. Okay, I have our cuff installed down in there, and I pumped it up there, and I will turn on the smoke machine. And I'll connect it here, and we'll hope to see some smoke. Blow the smoke out of the way here. This has been a good little machine. It's reasonably priced. Bought it because I saw somebody using it on YouTube, like Mario or one of those guys. Pretty sure the air comes around across the front of the car in the intercooler and then comes back up to the throttle body right here. Not seeing anything though. I've been wrong once before. Okay, I am starting to see some smoke rising up from the bottom. Can't really see where that's coming from. It's a lot of smoke though. I'll just raise the car up and look at it from the bottom. Oh! I left the smoke machine running, obviously. You know, this here is where a good visual inspection would save a guy a little bit of time. I was just over here, and I didn't even see this. Now, the key point here is, you see that oil right there? Turbo's put out a little bit of fine mist of oil. So that mount is broken. Obviously it was broken in the wreck, and they didn't catch it at the body shop and replace it. I'm 100% convinced that's going to fix our problem. I'll get the customers okay, get one of these ordered, and we'll put it on. There's the part number on it. As we try and get the sensor installed on this GTI, we realize that this plastic piece is missing also that it mounts on. This clips onto the hole that we showed you, and the sensor clips through there. So we ordered this in. It was just a few bucks. That's a lot of work to go through just to put a sensor in there. Was it hard to get out?
Ah, shucks, boss, it wasn't nothing.
We'll put some loom covering around that, and we'll maybe lengthen the wires to make them length appropriate. There is a bracket here for the wiring harness to go through after we cover it with loom, and then we'll solder those wires in there. And then we'll solder those wires in there. We're definitely going to have to lengthen them, aren't we? Bob's finished up the installation there. Nice repair, Bob. Ooh, that has a nice little bracket down there for the harness. Wonderful.
I'll get it.
Okay, Bob's got this all the way back together. You can see the sensors in there now mounted nice. This car has like this neat little spoiler kit on there. It's a little annoying because we had to take it off to do this work, but there it is. I have had Bob remove this pipe, and here's the old one that's broken. This bracket goes about right here. Something like that. And I want to point out that this tube has the MAF sensor on it. And here's our new tube. There's the part number if you need it. This is an expensive part from Volkswagen. Bob's going to get this installed. We'll verify it runs with the mass airflow sensor plugged in, and we'll go for a road test. Okay, now that we've got an ambient air temperature sensor in there and mass airflow sensor plugged in and the boost tube that was broken replaced, let's go in there and clear codes on it. There's one of our codes. Yeah, our two codes are there. Let's clear it, see if anything reoccurs. Nope. And we'll video the car to see if it starts and runs, and then I'll go drive it. Okay, let's see if it stays running. Okay, the idle isn't surging, and it's staying running. Let's go take it for a drive. Now, the customer told me that this car wasn't a crash and they rebuilt the front end. I didn't remember it at the beginning of this diagnosis, but he had told me that. I talked to a lot of different people, so I can't always remember every detail. He did refresh me on it when I called and talked about the sensor being missing, and he refreshed me that the front end had been rebuilt on this car. So obviously we know why the part was broken and the sensor was missing. I want to point out that the customer replaced the mass airflow sensor trying to correct this problem. It's commonly repeated on the internet that if you unplug your mass airflow sensor and it makes the car run better, that you have a bad mass airflow sensor. I don't agree with that at all. There may be some situation where that becomes true, but mass airflow sensors need to be diagnosed just like anything else. On these cars, when the car will run with the mass airflow sensor unplugged but won't run with it plugged in, it almost always means an unmetered air problem or a pirate air problem. And the smoke machine was an easy way to find that problem, although I should have seen it with the visual inspection. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, be sure and click the like button. Ask any questions down in the comments below. I love answering the questions on these videos. It takes me a lot of time to make these videos. If you want to contribute to the continued production of these videos, find the donate icon on my website at www.kansascitytdi.com. If you want to watch some more of my videos, there'll be one up here, one right here, and don't forget to subscribe.